Bears, blog, boys, you know it all, computer, analytic, geeky nerds. Michael Schneider, Tom Cavanaugh, the Bear, blog, boys, know-it-alls, doing some podcast somewhere. Nobody wants to hear you. Geeks, you pencil-pushing, skinny jean-wearing geeks, you.
Coming to you live from our mama's basement, this is the Bears Blog Boys podcast. I'm your co-host, Tom Cavanaugh, not here with my good buddy, Michael Schneider. Schneider is having some technical difficulties on his end. He's going to try to join at some point during this episode. So we will wait for him, but I just thought we should get us started because there is a lot to go over. A lot of Bears news happened. It's been a while since we've been able to record. Both of our work schedules have been really crazy. This is a busy time of the year for both of us. So we're coming at you a little late to recap the last preseason action the Bears obviously had against the Chiefs. That's kind of where I wanted to start the episode, but a lot of this is going to be talking about the Bears, initial 53. A lot is going to change. I'm going to assume not a lot, but, some is going to change. The depth on this roster, I don't think it's going to stay the same at the start of week one, but there definitely is some news. Just to recap what we saw against the Chiefs, because the game was pretty mixed, right? Like the first quarter, it felt like the same old Bears. Like the offense was kind of a disaster. And just things were not clicking. I kind of want to start with the defense, though, because I think the defense was a lot more concerning. I know that this is a new defense. It's honestly like a totally different style of defense, too. And all the stars weren't playing for the Bears. I mean, I think maybe the most important player on the Bears defense for this specific scheme of Dennis Allen wasn't playing, Jalen Johnson. I think we saw how much the Bears really, really need him to be ready for week one against the Vikings because, I think Tyreek Stevenson has had, he's been up and down throughout his career, but in the preseason, it kind of was nothing different. Me and Snyder had very high expectations for Tyreek Stevenson. Not high. I mean, I don't want to speak for Snyder. I obviously saw some of the concerning elements of his tape and who he is as a player. But I thought this would be a better scheme fit for him for sure. And just through one brief preseason stint, it didn't look like it benefited him that much. I still thought struggled, but the guy that really struggled, who I had been concerned about this entire camp, and I really wasn't buying the hype train, was Nahshon Wright. I promise you, going back and watching the All-22s, the Chiefs could have had the deep ball whenever they wanted it against Nahshon Wright. Whenever he was left one-on-one, it was a disaster. I just think this is a guy that just can't really play. He doesn't have the change of direction skills, and I just don't think he has the coverage feel to be relied upon in those isolation situations, which he will be doing a lot of in Dennis Allen's defense. I know, like, from a physical body type, he's an ideal press corner, right? He's tall, long arms, but when you just watch him play, I just think he takes too many false steps, and he's just always in retreat mode, or he's always in panic mode, I should say. And you saw that kind of come to life against the Chiefs, against like Xavier Worthy, against Tyquan Thornton. These aren't even guys that, like, Xavier Worthy's good, but these aren't even guys like that are like Justin Jefferson, who he would see if Jalen Johnson does not play. So I think that's a very, very concerning element that I guess I didn't take into account enough. If Jalen Johnson can't go in week one and he's the CB4, the first guy to jump in, if one of the Bears starters goes down, I'm very, very concerned because, again, this is not a guy who's had a lot of starting experience elsewhere. He's kind of bounced around. He really hasn't been able to stick on any rosters, and I think there are reasons to that. And, again, I don't want to just trash the guy. Like, he's an NFL player. I think that there are intriguing traits with him, but I just think he's way too unproven. And from what we've seen in a limited sample has been scary when you're talking about going up against the top flight offenses, especially in week one, when you're going up against arguably the best receiver in the NFL. That's a matchup I really, really don't love in this defense. So that was concerning. And then the rest of are the reason why I'm concerned heading into week one. And I know this was against the Chiefs offense that's established, that has been together for a while. This was one of the hardest preseason opponents you can face, because a lot of the times when you're going up against offenses in the preseason, a lot is new, kind of like what we saw from the Bears. Things are taking time to gel. There's a lot of turnover, I would say, on average for teams. on like who their offensive coordinator is, who their players are, where offense requires more reps, more timing, more feel together than I think defense does. And obviously you're going up against Chiefs who've had Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kelsey for years now, right? Like for nearly a decade. So it's a little different, right? They have a lot more continuity than your average NFL team. But I think the concerns about the pass rush really came to light, right? I thought Montez Sweat played okay. I think he got held a couple times and it wasn't called. But really the more concerning element was I thought Deo got to take it to him. And again, I don't want this to be like a trash Deo show because I was not high on that signing, but you just kind of saw him struggle and not be able to win against a rookie. And granted, a very talented rookie who looks really, really good. I don't want to, again, water either performance down. I'm just saying, like, if this was the opportunity for Deo to show, okay, he's a better fit for this defense. He's doing what they want him to do. This is why they went out and signed him. And the rookie totally manhandled him. I think just from the start to finish of his playing time, there really wasn't any redeeming reps. And that's concerning, right? Because it's only going to get harder in the regular season. And this is a defense that wants to win with 4. I know they get a little bit more aggressive against younger and unproven quarterbacks. So I think that Dennis Allen will be able to scheme around that. But as this team progresses, right, me and Snyder have talked about it all the time. And I think this Chiefs game, in terms of a game plan, I know it's preseason, very vanilla. Like neither team is going to be showing their crazy stuff. Even though the Chiefs were calling some pretty crazy plays and some pretty effective plays, which I thought was surprising. No team's going to be showing their regular season stuff, their playoff stuff in a preseason game. I totally understand that. But as a team progresses and gets better and our fans' hopes gets to a playoff caliber team, those playoff caliber teams that you're going to face, those playoff quarterbacks you're going to have to face, that's a better way to put it. You're going to have to win with rushing with 4, right? Quarterbacks, the top quarterbacks are too good to just blitz over and over and over again. They're going to figure you out and they're going to make you pay for it. The best defense is, we saw with the Eagles in the Super Bowl, right? I don't even think they blitzed an entire time that game because they're able to win with 4, right? They're dominant up front. And I think the Bears are so far away from being that, from even being a playoff caliber as it stands on paper right now. Could Gervin Dexter take the next step? Could Grady Jarrett turn back the clock? We haven't seen any of him yet. And could Grady Jarrett be better, 2 years from that injury he had? Absolutely. Like there's pathways for this thing to get better. And if Gervin Dexter, Grady Jarrett can draw more attention, maybe that helps Montez Sweat. But right now, I still think the pass rush is such an issue. I thought it was an issue even after all the moves they made in the offseason. I thought it was an issue then. So again, this is not just like initial takeaway from the preseason. This is kind of confirming what I already thought. And going up against the Chiefs, and again, it's only a preseason game. I understand that. But that's a pretty good measuring stick, right? Like that's a pretty good measuring stick of this is the caliber of team. If we want to reach the heights that we want to reach, right, as fans, with the expectations, with bringing in Ben Johnson, Dennis Allen, I definitely think that like this is a good measuring stick to see, okay, can your defense hang? And Snyder has joined. Snyder, I'm just talking about, and it's good to see you, buddy. I'm glad you're able to join. I'm just talking about the Bears defense kind of struggling against the Chiefs offense. And I think the most concerning element of that game was the lack of a pass rush.
Yeah, and I remember talking about that last podcast, Tom. Here's the thing, right? I think that we were so used to, and Ryan Poles was so used to seeing his defensive line get taken for a ride, right? Like push back in the run game, push back in pass protection, giving quarterbacks all day to throw. And we kind of overly invested into guys who are, Dennis Allen, 4-3 guys, beef up, guys who, that's not going to happen, right? They're not going to get pushed back. They're more like beefy dudes who can collapse the pocket, but they're not winning one-on-one explosively, off the line of scrimmage. Now, when you have a professional quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, who, again, that's not going to fluster him, right? That's one easy maneuver. He's buying himself time, and he's hitting the guy pretty much open in stride. That's what you face, right? You might have that bend but don't break defense. You might be okay in run defense, but yeah, when you're going against an experienced pro like Patrick Mahomes there, and you're not generating quick, fast pressure, he's going to make you pay. And I think we're going to see that a lot when it comes to the Mahomes caliber type of quarterback.
100%. That's exactly kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Like, I think that there are things to mask a lack of a pass rush against inexperienced quarterbacks where you feel a little bit more comfortable blitzing and scheming up different pressures. But it's really hard to do that down in and down out against the best quarterbacks because they will figure you out and they'll make you pay for the extra pressure that you're bringing, right? It's really a give and take. So I'm not saying that they could never blitz against the better quarterbacks, but it's like to consistently win throughout 4 quarters. If you don't have guys that can win their one-on-ones, that's the issue. And that's kind of why I think, yeah, it's just preseason, but like what is going to change about them not being able to do it in preseason to the regular season, right? Like this is what they're going to be asked to do in the regular season as well. They're going to be going up against a really good offensive lines. So I think it is a notable takeaway. And again, Snyder too, I kind of preface this. This was concerns we already had, right? This is not a new concern from one preseason game. It kind of confirmed what we already thought.
Exactly. Yeah, that's been my biggest concern is the defensive line, right? I think it's going to be an improvement of what we're used to, but again, have higher standards, right? So yeah, I just it's still my biggest concern, Tom, because I think a lot of guys did play in that preseason game, right? I think more in regular season, you're going to see a fresher rotation. You're going to see maybe a little bit more creative possibilities. And you'll see Dennis Allen get a little bit exotic, creative with his blitz, but you can't really, you can't live with that. So yeah, that's like the one thing, Tom, that is definitely my biggest concern of the offseason or going into the season.
Most definitely. And I think I think the Bears, even though the Vikings offense was really, really good last year, I think that they are kind of fortunate that this is JJ McCarthy's first game ever, right? As a starter. So I think they are kind of fortunate that they'll be able to maybe have a more exotic game plan and show some of those unique pressures that we know Dennis Allen can do, those unique defensive coverage looks, which we'll talk about more on our preview episode. So it's not like they're going to be going, against the Lions in week 1. They are going against them in week 2, although they will be seeing a more experienced quarterback. But I think it's going to be really important throughout the season, the Bears to find any way, whether that's the guys getting better or maybe even looking for a trade, which we know Trey Henderson, which we talked about last week, is now off the market, at least for this season. So that's definitely my takeaways on defense. On offense, Snyder, I was a lot more disappointed while watching it, like real time. But going back and watching the all-22s, I mean, my biggest takeaway, I guess, from the offense and Caleb was I think Caleb's just playing like a tick slow. I think that's my main concern. And how does that, sort itself out I know it's only the preseason and they probably weren't doing a whole lot to make the offense easy. This is probably very vanilla plays that task a lot of the quarterback to kind of read it out and find the right guy. But I think he's just playing a tick slow. But I kind of expected that, right? Like offense, this is going to take time. This is going to be a work in progress. I am not expecting it to be the Bills game every single game in the regular season. I know that was awesome, but again, that was against the Bills backups. I'm expecting this offense to take time before it really hits its stride. And I thought overall, some of the struggles were just the plays were not great against what the Chiefs defense were doing as well. Like I didn't think it was all on Caleb like I did while watching it. So again, was it their best performance? Was it a good positive sign? No, but I'm not overly panicked about the offense. I've always kind of expected it to be a work in progress.
Yeah, and I like that you're keeping your cool, Tom. It's funny. I tried calling into ESPN 1000 yesterday. Usually I get connected. Didn't get connected this time. There was an issue with their phone lines. But I heard whoever they were talking, it was a big talking point. Just talking about how the operation hasn't looked smooth with Ben Johnson and Caleb. How there's growing pains there. It just doesn't look like they're ready. And I'm not one to just be overly optimistic, right? If you're listening and me and Tom are very critical, super honest, right? But I wanted to play devil's advocate. Now, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, you look at Ben Johnson, like he's obviously a nutcase, but I think he's challenging Caleb Williams, right? I think in practice he is, and he said, I think he said this, right? He is throwing literally everything in the book at him and seeing what he can handle, right? And again, I think that he's just challenging him. He's seeing where he's at. He's fully evaluating him in this training camp. And, I think that when it comes to Vikings week, when we're playing the Vikings week 1, I think you could possibly see a totally more condensed style of practice, right? That maybe Ben Johnson is adjusting, right? Making things a lot easier, not really being complex. I mean, you've seen it with Justin Fields, right? And he enters that game against the Browns, and he's entering this super complex offense with Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy didn't have like a backup like style offense for Justin Fields, and you've seen him struggle. Like I believe Ben Johnson is at least smart enough to where he's not going to force this super complicated super high IQ, super high instinct offense on Caleb immediately. And it's going to be like, well, you better figure it out, right? I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's going to be condensed. I think he's going to have a special game plan for the Vikings that he's going to adjust for, that they're going to install in practice that week. And I don't think you're going to, he might, I'm not saying he's going to look great, but I don't think you're going to task him with so much complexity and have him just seeing ghosts out there, right? I think Ben Johnson, why we brought him in, why we're paying so much money, is because it's going to be a work in progress, right? He's going to be able to adjust. He's going to have a game plan that maybe it is easier for Caleb. And then, it's going to progress with the, complexity more and more as we move forward. But I don't know. I trust the head coach to have a plan to win the game and not just like, hey, Caleb, you better go figure this out. This is my offense. I know we've seen that in the past, but I just don't think that's the case. So, again, my panic button, I'm not hitting it with Caleb Williams. I think what a lot of fans are, just hearing the reports from practice, seeing the last preseason game, I just think it's going to be a lot different.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not like it's been all bad either. Like
Right.
Caleb's preseason game last week was really good. That they said against the Bills starters, the preseason or the joint practice, Caleb was really good. So again, like it's not like it's been all bad. And I would even say against the Chiefs, it wasn't all bad. Like I think there were things that were not out of his control, but that weren't on him that made him look worse. Like even on that play where he took the sack, the Chiefs were in man coverage, and it was a terrible play against man. I think all the receivers really got pressed up. And yeah, Cole Kmet was coming open over the middle, but it was like Caleb had already got off his progression at that point. So like, yeah, everyone can screenshot it and be like, Cole Kmet was wide open. But if you're not looking within the timing of the play, then it's not really fair to Caleb, and you're not really understanding how the quarterback is reading it out. So like, again, like I don't even think it was all bad. And I think I like what Caleb has been trying to do, play within the structure of the offense, not just bail. Like usually when a quarterback bails on plays, they don't know what they're seeing. And I don't think that's been the case for Caleb. Has his timing been off? Has he been late? Has he been rushed? Absolutely. But I still think he's trying to work within a system. He is learning for the first time. It very rarely ever just is amazing right away. And Snyder, I think you hit it on the head. It is going to be and how do you game plan in the preseason, right? How do you expect what you're going to be seeing from a defense of starters who you don't even know how long they're going to be playing for, right? Or what they're going to show you. You can only game plan so much, whereas in the regular season, it will be a way more focused and narrow game plan. And that's exactly what you said. So I'm right there with you. I think we're going to see a lot of the easy gimme plays that make things easy for Caleb that they don't want to show in the preseason a lot more in the regular season. So again, I think there's just going to be a lot more aiding from the coaching staff, like you said, from a game plan perspective, from a play calling perspective, that I think will help Caleb get in more of a rhythm. I think from the moment the game started, and this is a criticism of Caleb that I think that happens more than it should, or it has in his career so far. Like the first play of him fucking up the snap, or he fell down on that revert, like those plays got to stop, because then you're just kind of setting the tone for how the offense is going. It felt uneasy from that moment on. And maybe that's why I thought it was worse than it was. But those plays definitely need to be eliminated.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Tom. And I appreciate you're seeing growth from Caleb trying to play in structure, right?
Mhm.
Because that's what's going to bring down his time to throw, right? That's going to
Yep.
make the offensive line, who again you're shaky at the left tackle position, it's going to help you mask that there. So again, I see the growth. And again, the reports that I hear out of camp, I just think that they're totally, you know, such overreactions, right?
Yes.
I just think that, and Tom, again, maybe it's the Bears fan in me, a little homer in me, that I think that his offensive weapons are just too talented to make things so hard for him, right? Like you could find those easy buttons, right? You could put DJ Moore inside, Rome's a winner, on the outside. You're gonna have mismatches with Loveland. You're gonna have easy mismatches with Cole Kmet, right? I think like in the passing game, Tom, like you're just blanketed with so many threats that I think Ben Johnson is going to find the easy button for those guys to make it easy for him, right? And even if it's, again, if it's a little bit like, meat and potatoes, kind of dumped out, like that's fine. Like we just want to win games right now as Caleb develops.
Most definitely. And I just think that like it was always going to take time as well with
Yep.
what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
could there be some like masking and I guess like I don't know, just like easier plays for Caleb in the regular season where you're not putting as much on him? Absolutely. But like for him to get better, it was going to take time. Like I don't know any
Yeah.
quarterback that just steps in and is amazing in this offense in his second year. I think like we've seen, because think about it too, Snyder, like while we're excited about this offense for Caleb and what it can do for him as a player and how it can help him improve as a quarterback, like this is a totally different offense than what he was in college. Like
Oh yeah.
completely different, right? So like it was always going to take time, and I think fans just really want this thing because there's so much hype around them. Really wanted to hit the ground running, so there are overreactions, right? And the Bears have given us no benefit of the doubt at all throughout our fandom for
Yeah.
like the last like 15 years. So yeah, I think that there's always like reasons to why we react the way we do, but I think that's really the only big takeaways I had in this preseason game, Snyder. I think my next takeaway kind of has to do with the initial 53-man roster and where the Bears stand from a roster standpoint. Snyder, I am very worried about the running back depth. I know that they're very high on Monangai. I don't know what in the world they think of Roshan Johnson. He made the roster, so that's that. But they're going into this unless they like we're just holding them out for a precaution. They're going into this season with DeAndre Swift being the only fully healthy running back on the team, because Travis Homer made the team as well, but he's on injured reserve. So if Swift goes down, I mean, I really don't know what happens here if those guys can't play in week one.
I mean, I think it would be malpractice, right? If Manangai and Roshan were like not sure to be ready week one, right? I think that they're being precautionary with both of them, and I'm
Okay.
talking Roshan and Manangai, that they're locked into week one, right? Because if they're not, Tom, I just think that's severe malpractice, right? Like you should be having another body there, and maybe someone gets elevated from the practice squad, but I don't think like that's the right way to do it, right? I think you should be bringing in another body if you're uncertain about them, but I just feel like Tom, like they got to be certain they're there week one and they're just being extra precautious.
Which is fair. And if that's the case, then I definitely hear you. I know less about Roshan's injury. The thing is, like when Monangai was held out in the second preseason game, there was a clip like the very next couple days where he was practicing, or at least he was in pads. I don't know if he was like doing individual work and maybe he wasn't actually like practicing full contact. So I thought he was fine. And maybe again, they were just being precautious. But then for him to not play in the next preseason game, I was like, okay, maybe this is more of a serious injury than we initially thought. And they haven't really, nothing's been reported. All we know is he's kind of banged up. Nothing else has been reported. So I don't know if the Bears, I know it seems like the Bears are high on Monangai, but I don't know if they're looking elsewhere. Like, are they looking for a trade possibly? Because I do like the idea of Swift and Monangai being a 1-2 punch. It's just, right now, as it stands, if Monangai is more hurt than we are led on, I think you're putting a lot on DeAndre Swift, which is fine. But if he gets hurt, that's what I get more so worried about.
Yeah.
If you're giving him all the touches, like that's a lot of wear and tear. And if he gets hurt, then like you're really screwed, right?
No, yeah. I mean, with DeAndre Swift being hurt, you're losing so much explosiveness, right? Yeah. So yeah, I hear you in that regard, Tom. That you maybe want someone that maybe kind of mirrors Swift a little bit in your room, but yeah, because I mean, yeah, I guess yeah, it is risky, Tom. It is a risky running back room, given the injuries.
Yeah, and that's what I was surprised about when the Bears made their waiver claims. They obviously bring back Jalen Jones, and then they brought DeMarco Jackson in. I think he's a special teamer. I don't know if he'll actually see any playing time, or maybe they just wanted some linebacker depth. But I think I'm very I was very intrigued, not intrigued. I guess I was very like surprised they didn't bring in more depth or keep one of their guys just in case. But we'll see. Maybe that they feel a lot better about Roshan Johnson and Monangai's health, and they've kind of treated it throughout the preseason. Senator, in terms of initial 53 takeaways, so the Bears made a lot of cuts. I think the two big headlining cuts were their third round pick and fourth round pick from 2023. That was Zach Pickens, who was the first pick of the third round. And then it was Tyler Scott, the fourth round wide receiver. Signer, any initial takeaways? Are you surprised at all that either of these guys got released?
Not surprised, right? If you look like outside in, you look at a third round pick, a fourth round pick, drafted in 2023, Tom.
Yep.
It's a bad look, right? And then I pulled up the draft history, and I'm looking at Ryan Poles from round 3 to round 7, and I understand, right? Across the league, the hit rate there, it's incredibly low, right? But you look at, I counted 19 opportunities there, and I think the only guy that exceeded expectations was Braxton Jones, right? And don't get me wrong, I get it, right? Most GMs are not good in the late rounds. And I'm not saying Ryan Pace is a better GM, but, he got us David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, Darnell Mooney, Eddie Jackson, Bilal Nichols. Like, you found, I'm not saying they're great guys or anything, but they were capable, right, to eat up snaps. Like, they showed promise there. And, we haven't gotten any of that, right? I think once the roster gets more expensive, you're going to, again, I'm not saying you got to find starters with every pick, but you got to do better than 1 for 19, right? If you were 4 for 19, I have zero complaints there, right? And I do think Poles has been stronger in the front end. Don't get me wrong, I'm appreciative of that, no doubt about it, but you got to be better, right? And if not, take that safe high floor guy, even if the ceiling's a little bit lower. Like, just find some impact there, because Tom, I know we're hopeful of like Noah Sewell, we're hopeful of Austin Booker, but these are guys who haven't done anything, right? We're just guys that we're hopeful haven't proving anything that they belong in the NFL other than making the Bears roster. So again, Tom, I'm just not happy of the overall body of work in round 3 to 7 for Poles there.
Most definitely, Snyder. And Tyler Scott, that one is not. I'm not as down on that. I kind of like Tyler Scott coming out. He was intriguing. He was a running back that converted to becoming a wide receiver, I think, out of high school. He was really athletic. There was people that liked him. Like there was intriguing traits about him. I thought that was a good dart throw in the 4th round. It was the third to last pick in the 4th round. So again, how often do those guys hit? The Zach Pickens one, I think, speaks volumes about what Poles has valued and where that can get into trouble. I think it's a very good case study of he really values traits, especially at the defensive line position. Like, it seems like every single guy that they draft is super, super athletic outside of Austin Booker, who's a 5th round pick. And I just think that college production matters so much. It is such a good predictor, right? I know sometimes we want to make it as easy as this guy's a freak athlete, we can teach him. That just rarely ever happens in the NFL. If you did not break out in college, you rarely ever get better in the NFL to the level that to be like a reliable starter, I should say. And I think Zach Pickens was the epitome of that. And this insane athlete, a 5-star recruit, was the same player in college every single season. He never broke out, right? He never, like, the progression was not good enough to warrant being the first pick of the 3rd round. That's a high pick. I know we like, he's characterized as a 3rd round, but he was the 64th pick in the NFL draft. And there was a lot of talent drafted therefore after him. So I think that just kind of speaks to how he's valued the D-line. And also, too, Snyder, I know the Bears offense had a lot of building blocks missing, and he's used a lot of his high capital on offensive building blocks, which is totally fair. I got no problem with that. I think the offense is more important anyway. But defensive linemen rarely ever hit outside of the 1st round. Like, that's just a fact, right? And he's thrown a lot at it in the mid rounds. And I think maybe, I know you got to throw something at it, right? I know you can't leave the defensive line as barren as Ryan Pace left it, but those are usually not the best dart throws, those mid round picks, because edges, D tackles have a better hit rate than edges, but that's usually like kind of a fool's errand to expect some of those guys to be productive players, to really rely on them the way that Poles has thus far.
Yeah, I wish, like, in the early round 3, round 4, I wish there's been more like interior offensive line swings, right? I wish there's been maybe a couple more running back swings, and you didn't have to stop at Roschon Johnson, right? Like, you could have had a swing there, like, just again, maybe guys that are high floor, low ceilings. I'm okay with that, right? That maybe they hit the ground running, but yeah, like we had, like, even like safeties, right? Have we seen a safety selection in rounds 3 to 5, right? I think Brisker might be the only guy, and then I think you're talking like maybe like Wilkinson or some 6th, 7th round swings, right? Like, you haven't seen like any of those there that a lot of teams get a lot of value there with those type. I know we took a punter in the 4th round, Tom. Like, like why are we not like just taking swing? They're less premium positions, but maybe high floor there. But we haven't seen any of that, so that's why, like, I'm just kind of frustrated with the entire body of work. Like, Braxton Jones, that was a great draft pick. That was a great process. Tracy, lengthy dude. You took it in round 5. And he exceeded expectations. Like, we haven't seen a lot of those.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, you just look at that 23 draft class. I don't want to keep harping on this draft class as a whole, but there was a ton of running backs and wide receivers, I think, that you would have felt a lot better about, who were productive in college, and I think just had a clearer path to the field. I just think it's always kind of a risky gamble, and we talked about this kind of with Shamar Turner, right? Shamar Turner, I think there's upside in the fact that he kind of changed positions, but for a guy who wasn't incredibly productive and was a 4th-year player, right? Like, I think, he had a good season at edge, but there was some intriguing traits with him athletically. The fact to gamble on him where they did, we'll see if that one works out. I don't know if that would have been the smartest move in the 2nd round. I think you can make a lot of those arguments with the defensive lineman that he's drafted. So it's just always, cool to look back at. Not cool, but I guess it's a good exercise to look back at. Okay, where did we go wrong here? And I think Zach Pickens is a very, very important lesson of, kind of like you said, where to attack which position where, and then also what kind of player you're attacking at a certain position.
Yeah, Tom, I have a conspiracy. I'm not going to rant on too hard. I think I was telling you about it the other day. Right. So when Ryan Poles was hired by the Chicago Bears, and obviously Matt Nagy was the head coach right before he got hired, and obviously he was fired. But Poles and Nagy had a long history in Kansas City, right? Yep. They worked a lot together. I'm sure they spent a lot of time in the war room, watching film, everything, right? And I remember Ryan Poles said that he had a long phone call with Matt Nagy, right? That they were tight like that. And my takeaway was that Matt Nagy just kind of like opened up to Ryan Poles, like, what went wrong, what went right, like everything, right? And my conspiracy, and I don't know, I have no sources to confirm this or anything, it's just me putting, this spoon and idea together, is that Matt Nagy told Ryan Poles that, hey, I had a GM here that does not draft to my scheme, does not draft. He just drafts his, best player available, or maybe not, but he values his traits and then he makes work. And I think Cole Kmet was like a prime example of that, right? When Ryan Pace drafted Cole Kmet and he gets put in Matt Nagy's offense, is that you're using him in like that Travis Kelce role, right? You're using this lumbering tight end out wide, trying to win one-on-one, and that wasn't him at all. That wasn't Nagy's style of offense, but that's how they were utilizing him, right? But then you see Cole Kmet get better, but Luke Getsy inline, type of tight end, and you've seen it, right? And I really think that conversation stuck with Poles, and I think Poles has been very guilty of drafting and spending in free agency very specific to the scheme, right? And I know this was a huge debate about over Bears Twitter, and I always thought like the best example was, and I know your boy Raul always says this, like, well, technically Aaron Donald's not a scheme fit anywhere because he's undersized and everything.
Right.
So what, are you not going to draft Aaron Donald? And then it was like the case when the Raiders drafted Clelin Ferrell over who was it, Brian Burns and TJ Watt, or no, it was Brian Burns, and then the Cowboys drafted Taco Charlton over TJ Watt, and it's like, okay, or when we traded away Greg Olsen because he didn't fit in Mike Martz's offense, like I was like one of those things. It's like, hey, like you need to separate scheme fit and the clear better football player and the clear better talent, right? I'm not saying scheme fit is not important, like it is, right? Don't get me wrong, because again, you can't draft a Cole Kmet, put him in that Travis Kelce, Matt Nagy, move tight end out wide offense. Like, yes, that's an extreme example of why scheme fit does matter, but you have to balance it, right? Like you have to make sure you're separating and drafting the better football player, the better talent, and make sure you can still fit in your scheme. And I think there were just examples of Bears history of being like the extreme, like where it just doesn't go well, and then you have the fan base run around like scheme fit, scheme fit, scheme fit. But wait a minute, it's not just that. So I think that's where kind of maybe Ryan Poles has been guilty. And again, that's just me kind of spewing stuff together, being a conspiracy. But I think there is a little bit of meat to that bone there.
In Snyder, there could be definitely meat to that bone, and I think that's a very interesting hypothesis there. But I think just coming from KC and being around Andy Reid and how probably large of a hand, at least on the offensive side of the ball, and even with defense with Spags, of how much of a voice they have in those rooms. I mean, that's Andy Reid's show, right? That's his organization in terms of who's on the roster, who isn't, who's calling the plays on offense, who's the head coach, right? Like that's Andy Reid's show. And I'm sure Poles has learned that it's a really, like, in order for this to work, it's a really important thing to have that collaborative relationship and that you're getting the players that the coaches want. But there's a give and take to that, right? And if you're having bad coaches, like we saw with Matt Eberflus, and you're picking players to fit their schemes like Luke Getsy and Bayless Jones, like that can get you into trouble.
Right.
I'm not saying that the Bears have that dynamic now, but yeah, it is important to balance out. I think it's good to have a voice that is not just giving in to whatever the coaches want, because again, the coaches are coaches first, and they're coming to the scouting a lot later into the process. Usually, right? That's what people say about how NFL teams are ran. And I think it's a good voice to kind of combat like Deo, for an example. And again, I don't want to write Deo off yet, but my expectations were low. That, yeah, this guy is big. He's long. He's got potential, I guess, but he's not been very productive. So he might fit your scheme from a physical standpoint, Dennis Allen, but he hasn't really been productive. Like, is this where we want to sink our money into? So yeah, I think it's a interesting dynamic to kind of sort through, and something that definitely could be the case right now with what Poles is trying to do from a roster building standpoint, really empower his coaches and try to find the best fits for them. And I think Zach Pickens was definitely an Eberflus influence pick. If you're just looking at physical prototype of what he kind of wants out of a 3-tech, athletically makes a ton of sense, but on the field, it never really showed.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
But again, not gonna rant about it. Again, I'm not gonna say Poles is a bad GM because of it, but I just think sometimes you have to separate like pleasing your coaches, right? Because coach, they have more of a short term, you know, scheme fit. Like this is my guy. I think you maybe seen it with Ruben Hippolyte, right? And you know, you see the coaches kind of getting fired up about it. But again, as a GM, you kind of got to separate that, right? You can't get in the emotions of, you know, your skill position coaches or your coordinators. Like you have to draft the best guy, the best talent, best football player. And yeah, like he has to fit in the scheme, but you can't just, you know, you can't ignore the consensus. You can't go out on a hunch and just like, hey, this is my coach's guy. I'm gonna reach 100 picks, you know, higher than the consensus because this is my coach's guy. Like you can't do that, and I think Poles has been guilty of that.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Snyder. I don't want to go through all of the like roster positions. We don't have the time to do that. But some bigger takeaways, I guess, Snyder. Ja'Day Walker, the wide receiver who was just lit up at the end of the preseason games, he made the roster. He basically beats out Tyler Scott and Devin Duvernay, who they just waived after those 2 waiver claims that they made. Other big takeaways, 10 offensive linemen made the roster. That's not super surprising, but that is a lot, right? They have multiple offensive linemen to like back up their tackles. Usually you have like 1 swing tackle. Not usually, but that's what I was kind of expecting. But Theo Benedict made the roster, obviously. Kieran is still sticking around. We were kind of wondering, okay, could he get cut given that all the depth that are all the players that are rotating in at tackle? They kept 10 defensive linemen. I also thought that was interesting. Andrew Billings was talked about possibly being cut, which I thought was really surprising. But I don't know, Snyder, is there any other big takeaway? I think, why don't we talk about Kieran? Are you surprised Kieran made the roster?
Yeah, that's where I was gonna go.
Okay.
So I heard the press conference. I think one of the reporters actually asked them, like, "Hey, like, you know, have you explored moving Kyron inside?" And he's like, "You know," he posed like, "Yeah, we actually did. You know, if you watch the last practice, you know, he got a lot of work inside there, and you know, he said he looked a little bit more comfortable there." So that's why I think he's still on the roster, right? 'Cause I think they're going to try him more inside. You've always alluded and suggested to that being more so his path. And, you know, I think maybe he could find a home there, maybe as a depth piece. I think that's valuable. So I think if you're talking about him just being an offensive tackle, I think he would have got cut, right? I
Yep.
think now that they're kind of trying him in on the inside, that, you know, maybe it might work out better. I think the leash is still going to be short for him. I think he has to make strides in practice and, you know, inside. And then, you know, hopefully it doesn't happen where he, you know, no one gets injured or anything. But, you know, if he has to sub in for anybody, hopefully he shows something there. So I think, you know, the pressure is still high on him. But I think that's why he made the roster, right? Because they see maybe some inside versatility there.
100%. And yeah, I'm glad that they finally made this move. They cut the cord. I get that he has super long arms. Like outside of that, I just did not see a tackle. Like you could tell from his first NFL action ever. Like he just did not have the foot quickness to stay out at tackle. He was just giving up his edge too much. And I was like, all right, like we're kidding with ourselves if we keep trying him at a tackle. I'm glad that they made the move. Our guy Daryl Conrad says this is the last stage of acknowledging an offensive tackle as a bust when you move him into guard. But it's different when you've always thought he was a guard. There's a ton of tackles from college to the NFL that moved to guard. I thought that was funny though, that he's taking a very pessimistic view on Kieran's growth and development thus far. But yeah, 10 offensive linemen kept. He's one of them. He's going to be remaining at guard. I think he has a pretty tough path to any playing time because they seem to really love Ryan Bates still. And then when Joe Thuney was out, their rookie Luke Newman was the starter. So I'm assuming he's the backup. He's the first guy off the bench in terms of the guards. If either one of them were to get hurt, which I'm sure one of them will at some point in the season. So yeah, I'm intrigued with Kieran, but again, like the expectations of him ever like amounting to a meaningful role this season, minimal. The defensive lineman, Snyder, the one that he just cannot go away, that he continues to make the Bears roster. Dominique Robinson sticks around. This is not going to make or break the Bears roster, but I'm just really fascinated what the coaching staff, this new coaching staff, is looking to get from Dominique Robinson, who just like he's been an intriguing player with traits, but like it really has not amounted on the field to much.
Yeah, credit to him for just sticking around,
Very
right?
true.
Like for credit to him. I don't know, Tom. I don't even know what to say about it, right? I don't know why he sticks around. I don't know what to be optimistic about. I don't even know if he'll get any snaps. I just don't know. I don't even know what to comment on that one, Tom. But just credit to Dom Robinson for making the team.
Yeah, he is he's undeniable, man. And I'm hoping maybe he can figure out a different, or I guess have more success with the new coaching staff. Maybe they can unlock something that we haven't seen yet, because I did like him coming out of college as a developmental guy. I just think it's not gone the way that you'd want it to.
Wasn't he like a quarterback, Tom, or something like a wide or something like crazy
Yeah,
like that before
he played a
converting to
bunch of
defense?
different positions, and edge was
Yeah,
the last one. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, interesting.
Other than that, I think the last thing I want to talk about, Center, before we get out of here, I think the secondary is pretty thin, right? Of guys you feel good about. Like you like Josh Blackwell as a backup and the slot corner. I actually kind of like that he's stuck around and he's been able to keep a roster spot. I know they brought back Jalen Jones, who has a ton of experience with the Bears in the last couple of years, even though this is a new defense. And then safety, I think, is just outside of Byard and Brisker, who just left practice with an injury. I think is really thin, right? You have a Jonathan Owens who was like a third string last year. He was just basically a special teamer last year, and Elijah Hicks. And I know Nick McLeod is kind of versatile. He made the team. He can play a little bit of everything, but I don't know, Snyder. I think if any of your starters go down, this could be a very troublesome group.
Yeah, and, Tom, I hate being so negative, and I hate like just talking about like feeding a dead horse, right? But like, I hated the free agency approach at safety, right? I thought, okay, Kevin Byard, like, fine, he's a leader. He wasn't bad last year, but I just thought like the upside with him wasn't that high. Obviously not a long term guy. So I really wanted the Bears to maybe move on from Byard and find a long term piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, you better find someone in the draft because hey, you have age. No one beats father time, right? So you have age concerns and a fall off with Kevin Byard, right? Then you have the concussion concerns with Jaquan Brisker. Why are you not like throwing a swing out there, right? Like you had Xavier Watts, you had the guy from Penn State. I'm drawing a blank on his name, like Makuba. Like you had options in this draft to worst case scenario, he's your safety 3, and you actually feel good about the depth. And then maybe he developed as a long-term guy, but we didn't do anything there, Tom. Didn't really draft anyone, didn't sign anyone. And I think you're in the same position of last year when, Brisker got hurt and, we had to toss out Elijah Hicks out there. Or, I just didn't like that, Tom. Because, again, that's just one of those things we're here. Playoffs is your goal, right? You're in a super competitive division. You have a safety out. Smart teams are going to attack that, right? So again, that's just one of the concerns is like the depth there. I initially felt really good about the cornerback depth, right? Like you had Terrell Smith there. You brought in Za Frazier, a Tracy guy, but now that's almost a concern if Jalen Johnson isn't out there week 1. You're like, holy shit, right? So again, it becomes concerning, Tom. The secondary depth now in total. So yeah, Tom, it's not looking really pretty in terms of depth.
Yeah, I mean, Snyder, we saw it from the preseason, right? Like Nahshon Wright was picked on a lot, and it was bad. It was really bad. Like, and he could have been picked on even more. And I talked about that earlier in the episode when you were joining. Like, this is if Jalen Johnson can't go, I'm very concerned. That's probably my biggest concern heading into week 1. I know that we talked about the pass rush being concerning, and I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I think we were pretty level headed on the offense, but like, I don't think the defense should look as poorly as it did in a preseason game. I just don't think that should be. Yeah. That's a really bad sign, in my opinion. And I have faith in Dennis Allen. Like, he's a really good coordinator. He'll have a really good game plan. That's what he does. But you can only mask a Nahshon Wright to some degree, especially with how this defense wants to play. They want to play with their corners on islands, right? They want to press guys. They want to rely on. I mean, I know they run a bunch of zone coverage too, but like if it inhibits the way that Dennis Allen wants to play, especially on those obvious passing downs, I think that can be a very, very real issue. And everything I've seen from Nahshon Wright just has me concerned. Some people think I'm overblowing it, but like it's so important in this defense, more so than it has been with the past couple defenses the Bears have run.
That's the thing, right? Sean Wright. It's like he almost reminds me. You're gonna laugh at this one. He almost reminds me of like the Equinemius St. Brown of
Yes.
cornerbacks, right? We're here in training camp and in the off season, like he looks like that guy off like stature, right? Measurements, and showing life without pads on, and in training camp and in practice. But then when you're under the lights and you're in full pads and you're playing against starting level players across the NFL, you really get shown who you are, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the case with Nahshon Wright. Like, again, stature guy, training camp guy, got to talk yourself into type guy is like, because you see a little trait, you see the length and everything. But then you see what happens, like, okay, hey, like this is not just the Bears training camp. These are, going starters. And you kind of see him got exposed and you seen him struggling. And again, I'd hate for him to be rolling out there week one and just being that liability because Kevin O'Connell is going to attack him, right? So again, I'm just tired of these little stories of like these stature guys and these Tracy guys, these training camp guys, and it never really amounts into anything.
Yeah, if he's out there week one, man, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be scary. That's going to be a huge talking point. And they just activated Jalen Johnson on the roster, on the active roster from the PUP. I have no idea what his status is. There's no extent to. Here's the only takeaways. Johnson was brought to the active roster. This is from Marquee Sports. Jalen Johnson was brought to the active roster, though there's no guarantee he'll be ready for week one as he recovers from a leg injury. The Bears can trust Stevenson and Wright. Good luck trusting Wright. That's a stretch. Trusting Wright to start, if that's the case, they have enough depth to survive a few games without Johnson. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I am very scared, which we will talk about more. But, Senator, I have to run. I think we talked about the most meaningful things about the Bears in episode 53. But we will be back. Our next episode, we will be previewing the Bears versus Viking game in depth. Definitely check that one out. Until we meet again, y'all, keep it real and bear down.
Bear down.